happening, everyone? Today, I have Mercury joining us yet again. The privilege. Mercury, how you been?
Very well. Thank you so much for inviting me back.
A pleasure's all mine. I got the charts that you did of my kids. And I will say that I think it was the youngest was spot on.
Wow.
Yeah. The oldest was there too, but she's a very unique person. And I don't know if anybody could really nail that down.
You know, a funny thing about astrology, and we're talking about astrology charts. Mm-hmm. I always like to remind people, astrology is a language. It's not a predictive quality. It doesn't have prediction as though people use it what's going to happen to me in the future? But it's really a language, and a language to describe the nature of who we are. I come from the point of view that there's only one thing in the universe. Whatever is existence, whatever creation is, there's just one thing, and that's what we call God. Now, some call it Yahweh. There's so many different names that you can give to the concept of creation. But what occurred to me some time ago, you can't separate God from God. If there's only one thing, and from what I can tell, based on the Upanishads, based on all the ancient texts throughout history, creation is one thing, and that one thing is God. Well, if God created everything, then you can't separate God from God. I mean, right? If God is the Father that creates everything, then everything is an expression of God, is it not?
Right.
And so what I realized is that we have learned to, throughout history, throughout ancient times, to separate ourselves from the basic nature of who we are. And what's happening right now, astrologically, is a very, very profound moment. It's so amazing that you have asked me to come at this time.
Yes, that is exactly why I asked you, because you mentioned last time that we are in or entering the age of Aquarius.
Yes, I call it the Age of Light. I wrote a book called The Astrological Predictions for the Age of Light. And what I see this time happening is what I would call the Age of Light, which is basically exposing everything for what it is. And what I wrote in my book is that in 2024, 2025, 26, in this period that we're in right now, all of our astrologers around the world have been waiting for this moment. We're having something happen astrologically we haven't seen technically in thousands and thousands of years, and some can't even identify when it actually has ever happened in our knowledge. And that's this. As we speak, just a few days ago, on the 13th, I think it was, Saturn and Neptune were at exact conjunct, but not exactly conjunct. On the 20th of February, 2026, it's going to be exact to the second to the minute. We've never seen that because it's also happening on the equinox, meaning it's also happening at the beginning of Aries, the beginning of the new year for this year. It's astrologically, cosmically, it's going to be the new year on the equinox. And on top of that, and by the way, they're in Aries. Aries is about fire. It's new beginnings, lots of energy. Neptune is watery. It's not that comfortable with fire. And then there's Pluto is also, by the way, in Aquarius. And we have Uranus that's going into Gemini. So these four planets are shifting into new places they've never been before in our knowledge. This is a new era. And so I called it the Age of Light, meaning that everything is being exposed for what it is. And that means if you are a racist, you're proud of it. You're not hiding anymore. You're coming out of the closet. If you're gay, you're coming out of the closet. If you're stupid, you don't care because your ignorance is the only thing you know. Everybody, in other words, is being exposed for who they are. You can't hide anymore. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the news, it seems to me, I was watching the other day one of the Senate hearings for a person who wanted to be the, I think, assistant secretary of some department. And he came out and said, "Oh, I'm a racist because I think America is only for white people." I couldn't believe my ears. Never in my lifetime have I ever heard anybody trying to get a government position saying, "Yeah, I'm a racist and I'm proud of it." It was stunning. And to me, that explains why people are not hiding. They're exposing themselves for who they are, and I call that the age of light.
Yeah, well, I think it started kind of when the internet came, right? And I don't think anybody knew exactly what it was going to be when it came out. When it started, it was just a communication network between, I think, the medical field or the military, and then it kept going. And now it's overtaken so much that the institutions that the powers that be would have used to throw our attention somewhere else or to shift a narrative, that's kind of falling apart because, well, here we are. We're on a show that basically, I mean, who the hell am I? I'm not Dan Rather. I'm not anybody that's, any kind of media personality, like per se, like traditionally, but I'm able to get my voice out there. We're able to do this show and it's able to go and, tens of people will watch it.
Josh, I grew up at a time when there was only 3 TV stations.
Yeah.
So they controlled the narrative, period. And so you're right. In those days, no one had the opportunity to express themselves like we are doing today. However, one thing I've noticed about this period that we're living in, there's so many podcasts now. There's so much going on out there. And unfortunately, it's been difficult to understand what is really true and what is a false narrative. And it's really hard now to decipher what is true and what is false.
I think that's the trade-off though, right? There has to be some kind of trade-off. I think that's what it is. It's now before you only had a trickle of the information that they wanted to send, but now you have you're drinking from a fire hose of information and you have to see what is good and what's bullshit. It brings a lot of the onus on the person, the responsibility on the person that's processing the information.
And that's why I said in my book that this is the age of light, because everybody is now coming out of whatever darkness they've been hiding in. And now everybody knows where you're coming from. Nobody's afraid. Nobody's hiding, period. And that is a good thing. That's really a good thing. And I think if you notice, I'm 77 years old, and I've been teaching yoga for 25 years. I've been taking yoga for 27 years. I did yoga back in my 20s at the National Theatre School of Canada. And it wasn't until I was 48 that I really started doing yoga regularly and consistently. And it has been the best thing that's ever happened to me because it's brought me into the present moment. And when I say present moment, I really mean I no longer am mentally masturbating in my head anymore and just thinking about my problems or what happened to me when I was 10 or what I want to do next year. And there's chatter. Most people, they cannot calm down their mind. And in the last several years, my mind has just basically become in harmony with my spirit, with my body, and my actions. And I am so, so grateful for having been consistent with yoga. It has changed everything because you recognize there's only one thing. First of all, the mind is a projector. It projects its fears and then tries to sort out how to avoid the problems that you anticipate. That is part of our problem, is that religion and politics have created us to live with fear. And why? Because then you can control people with information.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing is like, what's a government? It's basically a gang that just has a monopoly on violence. And that's just what it is. You could say, well, why do you pay your taxes? Because they're going to be violent to me if I don't. They're going to throw me in jail or something, or then that's kind of we've all kind of accepted that.
I would say they're in control of the narrative and they can construct the country the way they want. That's why you have basically, I forget the exact percentage. I could be wrong about that. I'm probably wrong about this, but something like 1 or 2% of the population in America owns 90% of the wealth.
Oh, and it's only getting more dramatic. Yes.
So what we're going to have happen, and I don't know exactly when, but we're going to have another depression. There's no question about it. Why? Because prices are never going to come down unless there's a depression. And why? History has shown us that. And history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have another depression. And I think it's partly, and I wrote in my book what I thought was going to happen. And I kind of indicated in the next couple of years, I think if China tries to invade Taiwan, what I wrote in my book is I think China's actually going to have a civil war. And if you look at the history of China, they're notoriously violent.
Oh, yeah. Very bloody history.
And so I think if they have a civil war, all their manufacturing ends, that's what's going to trigger the depression. Because then all of a sudden goods aren't available, people don't have any money, people are out of work, and that's what's going to finally lower the prices. You have to understand, when I was in college, in the late 60s, I'm paying 25 cents a gallon for gasoline. Okay, wait a minute. They would check your oil. They would wipe your windshield. They would do your tires, give you dishes and plates for 25 cents a gallon. That's what I experienced in college.
Wait, dishes and plates?
Yes. You would get dishes with Bugs Bunny on it and plates. Absolutely. That you could eat off. Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. I'm just telling you. That's how far we've gone. And now you're paying $4 or $5 and you can't find anybody to take your money.
we got screwed, Drew. Damn.
That's a fact.
Wow. I mean, going back to China too, you have to think like them in their most recent iteration of their culture, they don't have, they may have had a bloody history long ago, but the people now don't have the stomach to see other Chinese getting, because they consider Taiwan other Chinese people. You know, I mean, even though Taiwan may not agree, but that's it, to them, I think the optic of Chinese people killing Chinese people is going to be too much. And I think you're right about the Civil War. That's going to be what's probably the catalyst to it.
A lot of their relatives are in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. They're still, I mean, there's so many family connections, and that's part of it. And they're going to feel that the government has overreached themselves to kill us like having a civil war. And let's face it, we're kind of going through a cultural civil war right now in this country. Mm-hmm. It's a cultural civil war.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to, it's somewhat similar to Russia invading Ukraine, you know, because I've had people on that had fought and then they come over here, and it's like, my family lives in Ukraine. I live in Russia, and it's like, I don't want to start shooting at them, you know? And it's the same thing if we went to war with like Mexico, you know, there's a bunch of people that have family in Mexico.
Yeah.
And that would create probably some kind of a civil war here, I would imagine, or some kind of it'd be uncomfortable to say the least.
Well, hopefully it doesn't get out of hand. Technically, we've had smatterings what's been going on in Minnesota. I mean, that's an example of if that got out of hand around the country, then we're in deep doo-doo, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think, you know, the way that was going, it's kind of like the worst thing for somebody that actually wants some kind of immigration reform. You know, because you see that and you're like, I wanted it to be done the right way. Like you had so much support, and then you squandered it, and you could have got it done legislatively. Instead, you marched down the street like, I mean, we've all seen the movies, but you know, like that's the worst thing to see that and like see it just squandered. You know, so nobody really cares about what they say they're going to do. It's just like, let's just sow chaos. Let's make them fight themselves.
Well, unfortunately, I grew up in a time during the 60s. The 60s was the most violent decade we have had in recent memory. And I grew up in high school and college when that was going on. John F. Kennedy being assassinated, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, you go down the line. These
Malcolm X, JFK.
Yeah, all of these people were assassinated. I mean, dead. They didn't just wound them, okay?
They didn't even say, oh, it was an accident. He had a car accident. Now that's what they do.
And people were in the streets all the time. 4 students at Kent State got murdered by National Guard. And that's what turned the country. When that happened, that changed everything because they realized, what are we doing? We're killing ourselves. Well, that's what happened in Minnesota. Once you have your own country killing its own citizens, that's a bridge too far. And I hope that we are waking up to the idea that this age of light is exposing all the corruption, all the evil, all the fear that people live with is coming to the surface. And we as Americans are going to make a decision. I hate to point this out to people because I know they're going to get upset when they hear this. We stole the land from the Native Americans, and we just don't even think twice about it. We are such a violent country. From the get-go, we were killing the people that helped us survive at Plymouth Rock. We have been killing the people and took their land and destroyed their nations. There were something like 350 nations or something like that, and we basically destroyed them. We are a violent country, and we have to own up to that.
It depends. This part was purchased by Spain, but then Spain did, so Spain came over, and have you seen the movie, I think it's called Apocalypto? Have you seen the movie?
No, I don't. No, I haven't.
Okay. It's about basically the arrival of the Spaniards, but that's the very end. The last scene, spoiler alert, but the last scene in the movie, they see the Spaniard boats come, and you can see it's basically, it follows I think it's the Aztec Empire and, all the little individual tribes and stuff, and in the goings on, how they had to fight, how they had to find food, how they had to live and things. And then, all of a sudden this massive Spanish armada comes in with the guys with the steel hats, and it like
conquistadors.
Yeah. Exactly. Like Hernan Cortez. But yeah, they came in, and that was the very end. And I thought it was like a very artistic way to end that movie, where you could have shown them coming and slaughtering or whatever, and you could have shown that, but we all know kind of what happens when they come. That story's been told,
But again, the Spanish, they learned their lesson and they left, basically, and all of that subsided when they started doing the violence against these people who are trying to help them arrive. So when you look at what happened with us going to, and by the way, Columbus, I'm half Puerto Rican, my mother's Puerto Rican. Puerto Rico was the second island that he came back to when he did his second voyage. He went to Puerto Rico and virtually killed as many of the Borinquen Indians there as he could. And that was just because they were afraid of these people. They thought they were savages. They thought they had put them down as something below what they thought they were. And this gets back to why I am doing what I do. Compassion and love is really what I call the present moment. I am a mystic. I didn't plan on being a mystic. Then people say, well, what's that? What are you talking about? A mystic is a person who studies the mystery of life. Since I can recall as a child, I was always curious about the mystery of what it's like to be alive. Wow, this is strange. Where are we? What kind of a place is this? I just saw your 4-year-old daughter just briefly before we started. To me, all children are enlightened up until about the age of 4 or 5, and then they start coming out of the enlightenment. Now, most people, if you ask them, what does enlightenment mean? Most of them couldn't really tell you. They were, well, let's speculate and say all kinds of things, but they're never correct. I've not had one person answer it correctly. And it's not a romantic concept. It's a basic, simple, but very important concept. To be enlightened means to be present. That's all. That means you no longer are afraid of life. You no longer have opinions or judgments about life. You are present and you are what? One with creation. So Christ used to say, divinity, it's within. Zoroaster, all of these great teachers throughout history of mankind have said, you are that. The Upanishads say that you are that. And what are they pointing to? The universe. I think the Sufis said it really well. They said, you're not just the ocean. You are a drop of the ocean. so that you represent the divine nature of creation. You can't separate God from God. If God is everything, then we're not less than God. We are examples of God. So what I've observed in my life is that children are in that God state. They are enlightened. Why? Everything is now. I'm hungry. I want this. I'm going to do. Right? They're always they're not thinking about the past. They don't have one. They're not thinking about the future. Everything is now. Is it not so?
Yeah, give me some milk and warm it up now. That's what she says. Yeah,
and it's not like they're being rude. They're just stating a fact.
Yeah. Where do I want it? I want it now.
That's right.
Yeah,
and that is enlightenment. So, as we get older, culture takes over. They start convincing you of this. They start making you afraid. They say, if you don't do this, we're going to put you in jail. If you don't do this, you pay your tax. We're going to start to harm you if you don't get in line.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what most people become. They become fear-mongered, kind of in a subtle way, without realizing it, by the culture that they live in. Religion, to me, is politics using spirituality to cover their greed, their money, and their way of controlling people for more money. That's my opinion. Religions are one of the worst things that have ever happened. And again, that's my opinion. I'm not trying to harm anybody. I'm not trying to upset people. If you look at the facts, that's what it is. And government, basically, people forget, when we only had kings and queens basically running the Western world as we know it today, they were politics and spirituality. They controlled the church. And then somewhere along the line, people started to realize, well, wait a minute, if they're controlling the money and the narrative, maybe if we take God out of the question, just control the money, we can call something politics and we can separate. So that's when the king started losing their power, and then politics started to arise because then they became competing forces for the money of the people.
I mean, you could kind of trace that back to Henry VIII wanting divorces.
Correct.
And so that's kind of like, because what was it? Was it the Pope or a cardinal? I think it was the Pope. The Pope had to okay a divorce, and that was like you can't do that.
That's right.
And then he was like, well, then I guess I'll just
create my own church.
Say that you can.
and created his own church.
Yeah. And he created his own church. And so, I mean, it kind of went back to like, oh yeah, the king can do that. And so now it's like, now that's where it's separated. And I mean, there's been a lot of time since then. And, but one thing that I did take away from your last time on here, and, I didn't quite get it at first, but maybe it was because it was very early shot
in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm not a morning person either.
But you said, when does everything happen? Where does everything happen? And I was like, I don't know, and it's like, it happens now. It happens in the now. So you could be worried about something, but right now you're fine. Right now we're living right here. We're talking to each other. We're living in the now. This is when everything happens. And just accepting that will alleviate a lot of anxiety for a lot of people,
I told you once, and I tell everybody this because I think it's so profound. When I heard this, and I heard a Rinpoche. I've been doing radio for over 20 years, and I've interviewed all kinds of people, and I've been very fortunate to have been able to interview Rinpoches and various people around. And the one thing I learned, and he kept saying this, and this recording of him saying this, and he kind of was like he didn't want the cat out. He didn't want to let the cat out of the bag. But when I heard it after 20 times, I realized what he said. It was like he was afraid to tell people because if you know this, the game's over. What you are is what you have done. What you will be is what you do now. Because now is all there is. Eternity happens now. Think about it. Eternity. I have always known this. I can't tell you why. I never thought there was a Big Bang. And then when I found out where the concept came from, bingo. So you know where this concept, have you heard it, the Big Bang?
Sure.
Where do you think that came from?
Scientists.
How about we combine the two? A Dominican priest okay, was reading the Bible, and he was an astrophysicist as well. And he thought, wow, maybe God, when he created the Word, God created the Word, and the Word became... Oh, I know. Scientifically, there must have been an explosion, and that was the Word of God, and that what's created the universe. It was a paper. He wrote a 2-page paper about this. It got circulated, and all the religious people in the astrophysics world started to think, man, maybe this is true. And then all of a sudden, that narrative for many decades become that's how the universe began. There was a big bang. Now that we have these instruments, they're finding out maybe not so.
Yeah, I mean, who are we? We're basing this data off of extrapolated data that's been extrapolated. And I mean, I wasn't there. You weren't there, so and it's the same kind of thing. Like when you say, how did the dinosaurs die? Well, I don't know. I mean, I didn't run them all over with my truck, something killed them, but nobody was there to see. I mean, the birds, they're obviously similar to dinosaurs, and alligators have been around for forever. And so have sharks, but it's, how do you know what happened?
Well, there's some science has indicated that there might have been a major meteorite.
Yeah, the Yucatan.
Yeah, that caused it, and then there was cloud for many decades or whatever, and destroyed a lot of things. I mean, so there's some speculation. They kind of think a major asteroid hit the Earth.
Right, but then you wonder, like, what made dinosaurs become birds? You know what I mean? Because
evolution.
We see birds everywhere.
Evolution.
And they went tiny. Like I have chickens out there, and the little T-Rex in them comes out whenever they see a mouse. Because have you ever seen a cat? You've seen a cat go after a mouse. That's one thing. But a chicken is all business.
And they're fast.
Yeah, they're fast, and they will take a mouse right away from a cat.
Yep.
Because the cat will play with it. Maybe it'll kill it, but it'll play with it for a little while. A chicken, it's gone. Yep. Like that. And so you see the little dinosaurs come out, and you see like that there is something to the extrapolated data.
And so getting back to this Big Bang concept, what we're now finding out with the Webb telescope, and this is amazing to me, they are now speculating, some are speculating that maybe the universe is like 28 billion years old rather than 4 billion years old. The point of the matter is we don't have the instruments to really look back to eternity, which means there is no beginning.
Yeah, you can't carbon date space.
There is no beginning. There is no end. There's just now. It's always been this way. And it's hard for us who are very temporal. We're here in a flash and we're gone before we know it. Mm-hmm. So we can't understand the concept of eternity. So we have to think, well, I was started from maybe, sex was kind of a big minor bang, a small bang, and in a sense. So we use that metaphor. But technically speaking, life is a great miracle. It's a great gift. And getting back to your child, that enlightened being of yours, this is what happens to all of us. We are all enlightened. We're born enlightened because we're in the present. And as culture takes us out of the moment and makes us get to the rules and regulations that we knew nothing about at the age of 3 or 4, that's what captures us. Mm-hmm. For those beings like Jesus, like Buddha, and by the way, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts, Joseph Campbell, all these people, they were all enlightened. We have a lot of enlightened people on this planet. Not all of them are writing books. Not all of them are giving lectures. Mm-hmm. A lot of them just stay quietly doing their things and having their families and living their life. There's a lot of enlightened people today on this planet than ever before. And I think that is part of what we're going through is because we have so more enlightened individuals on this planet. It only takes, let's say, 100,000 enlightened people. That power is so powerful that they provide by being present. It is starting, I think, to help illuminate this, what I call the age of light, to bring everything to the surface and recognize now is all there is. And if you're suffering, it's usually attached to something that happened to you when you were a child. I would say most suffering of most people emotionally, you can tie it up to about the age of 4. If an enlightened child at 3 or 4 is being abused by a parent or something like that, that poor child spends the rest of their life suffering, trying to figure out what's wrong with life. Why are you hating me? Why? And it all goes back to that moment in childhood when they were abused. And that's why I think we have so many problems in this world, because children, we have over 9 billion people on this planet. So it's a very strange experience we're all going through. But the good news is we're going to die. And I mean that in a good way, because it comes with life. You can't separate death from life. And so why we've been taught to be afraid of dying, because if you die, I can't get any money from you, right? I mean, technically, if you're a religious person and if you're politics, you're dead. I can't tax you anymore.
Yeah.
So that's part of the control aspect. You know, the United States is the only country, I mean, think about this, that does not provide free healthcare and dental.
Well, we actually do, just not for United States.
That's what I'm saying. We're the only country,
Yeah.
and we're supposedly the wealthiest.
We pay for other countries' healthcare and dental and stuff like that.
And we're, almost $1 trillion in debt?
Yeah.
Guess what? We're never going to pay that off.
Yeah, and I mean, but we keep paying taxes. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about with all these Epstein files come out and everything, like, well, I guess we still have to pay them taxes, though.
You know, money is an illusion.
Yeah.
It does not exist. We created it. Why? To control people.
Well, yeah, especially when you have a country that can print its own money, and that's what they do, but they still tax you. Well, where does that money go? Why do you need it? You know, why can't you just let me keep it? Doesn't work like that.
We just said earlier, 1 or 2% of the population owns 90% of the wealth?
Mm-hmm.
That is not right. There's something wrong with that. Why? Because they control the narrative. When you have billionaires buying off the president, buying off government officials to get what they want, to pass legislation, so why? They can make more money? And you have, somebody has, let's say, billions and billions of dollars in the bank. What good is that doing? Nothing.
Well, the people that have billions and billions of dollars in the bank also have like a gated community, private security, you know, like things like that, where they don't live in this world. You know, they don't live here.
Shocking to see how much homeless people we have. In my day growing up, you might have had hobos. That's what the term was in those days, hobos. But they, in their nature, their culture, they would help people. They would do things for food or to be able to sleep on the porch or something. They would help people.
Yeah, they would have like, you know, the cartoon where they have the stick and the bag there and they're like jumping on boxcars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But now the desperation is so severe. How can we allow that to happen in America? I'm stunned.
Well, you also didn't have like, well, maybe you did, but it wasn't to the extent that it is today, like the pharmaceutical mafia. You know, you didn't have that kind of thing pushed down everybody's throats and
That's
like,
correct.
Oh, this kid, this little boy, he's like pretty excited. Get him on SSRIs or, you know, get him on. If he can't stop his fiddling, just give him his Ritalin.
That's right. That's right.
You know?
Drug the narrative, which is the people. You can drug them and create a narrative to control them. And then you're an alcoholic. How many ads of alcohol are on television?
Yeah, look at the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
What was it? It was AI, alcohol, gambling, and pharmaceutical drugs.
All the virtues of religion.
That's what it was.
All the virtues of religion.
But you know, like I think you're right that about the age of light, and you know, I've always heard that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and you know, I mean, as cliche as that is, maybe, but that's kind of what's needed right now. And you look at again what comes out in these files with people that don't view other human beings as people. You know what I mean? Like they're just vessels for whatever the hell you want to do.
For usage.
Yeah. You know, and like you said, there's a soul, there's stardust in there. And I even read that, you know, a dead body weighs different than a live body, you know, slightly different, but it's something that you can't really, what is that?
They measured when the person dies, they weigh them before they die. They may after, and then I forget the percentage. It's some point something.
Yeah,
less
it's
than
like 0.04 or something
a
like
pound.
that. Yeah.
But that is what we call the spirit has left. And so that reminds me now, if I may, I've come up with a narrative. It came to me several years ago, and this will be the next book. I'm writing a book now, but my next book is going to be this: 1 and 1 is 3. And what that means is I've come to recognize that there's only 2 things that exist in eternity. There's light and dark energy. It's scientifically proven there's really only 2 elements that exist in creation. It's light and dark energy. And we don't know what dark energy is, but we certainly use light a lot. To me, that's what the ancients called yin and yang. Left and right, good and bad, right? They put a narrative to it. But from a scientific point of view, it's just light and dark energy. So why do I say there's 1 and 1 is 3? Because light cannot compromise itself. Dark energy cannot compromise itself. So what happened? The agreement was create the third thing, which is what? The present moment, where everything has the opportunity to balance itself out to a 0 point, which is the present moment. I heard this recently by an astrophysicist, blew my mind, never occurred to me, that everybody on this planet, even if you're present and enlightened, we're all living in the past. Right now, we are living in the past.
Yeah, technically.
You know why? They measured, I don't know how they did this, but they say they measured the present moment goes by at 1/33 millionth of a second. That's how fast the present moment moves. So technically, we are all looking at each other from a past position. But because it's so small and so slight, we think this is constant and real because it's so minuscule, we don't know it and don't observe it or experience it.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to get really scientifically technical about it, you could say that it's like because the speed of light, right? So I'm watching you, just like if we look at a star, it could be dead. You know what I mean? We're looking at the dead light.
Yeah, all that light is billions of years old before it gets here. So we're not looking at the present moment. We're looking to the past.
Right. Yeah. So,
and then, if I may, another aspect about this is that I want people to appreciate to be alive is a great gift. And there's only, in my opinion, this middle point that I talked about, light and dark. The third thing is the present moment. That's called love. That's called God. I don't think you can separate the word from God and love. This is a great thing that we have here to experience life. And like I said about the Sufis, you're not just a drop of the ocean. You are the ocean as a drop of the ocean. So you are divine. And what all of these religions try to take people to not realize that they were all divine. There was only one person. It was Jesus. He's the only person who was like God. And yet, what did we do? We killed him? Hello? People were so stupid, and ignorant and uneducated that they believed what they were told because they were controlled by these people who were more intelligent. And intelligent people said, well, we can't let all these stupid, ignorant people kill us and overcome us because we have money and they don't, or we have property and they don't. So we have to create a narrative. I'm speculating here, but we created the narrative to control the masses so that we can control the money and control people. And that's why I think really religion was created, was to control people.
Yeah, I mean,
with a false narrative, I might add.
Do you ever read? Do you ever or have any kind of knowledge about like the what the Ethiopians believe happened? What the Ethiopian portion of the Bible is, the Book of Enoch.
I've heard of it. Remind me.
So it was, like there's the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. And
these, the story is Enki and Enlil were supposed to be, I think, they were brothers. They were related in somehow, but they were extraterrestrials, or however we can kind of perceive that, right? And they made it so that when they lost whatever, I think it was, and I could be butchering it, but they lost some kind of pyramid war with the people that they tried to enslave. And at the end, they scrambled everybody's brains or something to where they all spoke different languages. And those languages went on to create different religions. And now, it had to do with, I guess, having all the people that worked on the pyramids not be able to communicate with each other. So, I'm definitely butchering it, but it's only in the Ethiopian Bible because that was like the first one. And it's been taken out of a lot of the other ones, probably because it makes people uncomfortable,
Again, my problem with anything written about ancient times, except for there are a few texts like the Upanishads, Zoroaster, there's certain written dialogues that have been passed down, the Buddhism. One of my favorite, now that I think about it, I remember listening to Alan Watts, and he said, if you read this book, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So a friend of mine bought the book, gave it to me, I read the book, and near the end of the book, I read this sentence, and it just blew my mind, and I just couldn't help but start laughing because of the beauty of it. And it basically said, was like, according to this Buddhist book I read, it said, and it's called a koan. It's considered the first koan with like a riddle. Do you know why the world exists? And the answer is, the world exists to prove that the world does not exist. Which is the present moment. Technically, does not exist because it's already gone before it arrived.
Right. There's no catching it.
That's right.
Man,
that's deep.
Yeah. I mean, what's your interpretation of that?
Shut the F up.
Yeah, I mean,
I couldn't hold it.
It's like, it's the irony of it,
I think Shakespeare, I was a Shakespearean actor. That was my forte. I loved Shakespeare. I loved reading him. He taught me the importance of looking up words because I thought, what the hell is this guy talking about? So I'd have to look up this word. What's a bodkin and what's this and so on. And the point is, what I learned from him is, the great line from Shakespeare is Hamlet, one of Hamlet's. It was my favorites, was Hamlet, certainly. I probably have done To Be or Not to Be, light and dark, to be or not to be, light or dark, probably 400 times. And I would go into theaters at 1 o'clock in the morning and just by myself recite to an empty audience. And I would do it 2 or 20 times, 15 times. And I try to do it differently just to learn something. That's what actors do. And the line where I think it's Polonius says, "My lord, what are you reading?" Words, words, words. Words don't mean anything. We have created words to obscure the obvious, which is the present moment. And when you're a Native American, and I have been interviewing Chief Black Horse, he was a Lakota tribe spokesman. He has taught me so much about the native tribes and how they have been destroyed over the centuries. But they lived in harmony with nature. And there are some examples of them having killed each other, but very, very, very rarely. How they would create disputed moments with another tribe, they created a game so that if you were disputing this territory, you created a war with them. But the war it was like playing tag on your horse. And whoever got touched first by the other person lost. Instead of killing them, they resolved their issues by setting up a game that didn't kill you. But if you lost the game, then you had to leave that territory because you technically lost.
So like we could make the Olympics into just basically a war. And I mean, sounds like a lot more peaceful. And
It's kind
maybe
of a
people would watch it
metaphor.
more.
Yeah, but then you're dealing with smaller countries don't have the resources and the talent of numbers of people to compete with other bigger countries like the United States, Russia, and China, and all these. So in some ways, that's not as far as fair. But in Native American times, most tribes were almost based. And I wouldn't say exactly the same numbers, but they were 350 tribes. They were relatively about the same size. There were bigger ones, smaller ones, of course. But I'm just showing you how they resolved issues that were very important to them. But instead of killing each other, because they understood the sanctity of life. They understood what an amazing thing is to be a human being. It's an extraordinary gift. And we just take it for granted because we just don't appreciate, and this is the hard one for Christians in this country, everybody is divine. Even Christ said, look within. Heaven is within. Heaven on earth. This is heaven. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, not in outer space, but here. This is heaven if you act accordingly. It's that simple. But nobody gets what he was telling them because they don't want to know the truth. Why? Because it's not convenient. Then they have to give up their biases, their prejudices, which they are comfortable with because they know nothing else. Why? Because they're not present.
Yeah, when you mentioned Hamlet, it kind of took me back to where I first got introduced to Shakespeare, and I didn't know it was Shakespeare at the time. So I was watching this show called Beast Wars. So Transformers, you know what Transformers is?
You
So like Optimus Prime and like
Right.
they transform the trucks, the robots.
Right,
This one's like animals transform into robots. But there's this guy, Dinobot, and he's about ready to take his life with a sword. And he quotes Hamlet saying, the question of my being has been answered. I have something that I have no choice at all. And I didn't realize, I was like 7 or 8, right, when I'm watching this show. And then I progress on to I think it was middle school. And I'm reading these same lines, and I'm like, oh my God, that was like, I got the symbolism before I even realized it was Shakespeare, and it's funny that you get it from like a kid's cartoon, but sometimes the stuff in the 90s was surprisingly deeper than it is today.
Well, what you said, I don't recognize as Shakespeare at all, but I know what you meant.
Yeah.
They probably took
I
Shakespeare.
butchered the line for sure.
I was gonna say,
Sure.
I don't think
100%.
I don't think Shakespeare was a transformer kind of language.
No, he was not Dinobot. Okay. Yeah, he was not. He did not transform into a velociraptor.
But I get the gist. I know exactly. And true, all writers are normally are educated people to some extent. And they take the ancient terms and language and kind of update it to make it more practical for us and our cultures, how
Right.
they've changed and evolved. So in that regard, and again, children, that's what we do. When you become an adult who becomes enlightened, you become a child again. And even Christ said that, become a child again. And that's how you become divine, because children are divine. I mean, really, that's what divinity is to be present with creation, because creation is God as an expression. It's not an individual that controls everything or judges. And by the way, judgment, oh my God. In my opinion, I came to me one day, judgment is an opinion with a top hat, meaning that you think it's a judgment. No, it's just your opinion, but you're trying to make it sound like it's really important, really serious. No, it isn't. It's just an opinion that's dressed up to pretend like it's more important than opinions. Language is really important. And we don't use it very effectively in this culture, especially. I grew up in Germany. I lived in Iran. I've traveled extensively, spent a lot of time in Switzerland, Montreal. Language has been the bane of my existence to look up words. Just the other day I was looking up a word. I thought I knew what it meant, but I wanted to remind myself so I can understand the depth of the word. And so language is really the key. And we're so proliferated with so much garbage of language that has no bearing on truth, compassion, and love is really the only 3 important words I think that are relevant that can change anything. And if I may, real quick, I used to, you know who Baba Ram Dass is?
No.
Ram Dass, older people will know this. He wrote a book called Be Here Now back in the 60s and 70s. Very popular when I was in college. God, everybody knew this book. I used to listen to him in Montreal. My editor hates me to talk about myself, but I can't help it. I've had some extraordinary things happen to me. And I would listen with my girlfriend on Sunday mornings, freezing, 60 below zero in Montreal. Oh, my God, crazy, unbelievable. So we'd listen to this guy from New York City, and he was named Ram Dass. I didn't know who he was. But he was always talking about spirituality and love and compassion, forgiveness, and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought it was amazing. Wow, this is an amazing person. Listen to this. Fast forward 50 years later, he becomes one of my teachers, one of my yoga teachers. After he had a stroke, he was living in Marin. I was getting my license as a yoga teacher when I was 48. And I was shocked. I realized, oh my God, this is the guy I used to listen to 50 years ago on the radio. And here I am. He's my teacher now. And I used to run into him at these festivals after I had gotten my license as a yoga teacher. And we had these conversations about forgiveness. I'm not sure why we did this, but we kept talking about how important the word forgiveness is. It would just come up in our conversation. And he taught me that, according to him, the word forgiveness comes from the Greeks. They invented the word. People forget we invented words.
Yeah.
And it meant in the original meaning of forgiveness was to start over as if the infraction never happened. The key word, infraction, meaning there's no harm. You're not right. You're not wrong. I'm not wrong. You're not right. It's just an infraction, meaning like it's a meteorite hits the earth, killing the dinosaurs. You move on. You got no other choice. You got to be in the present moment. So forgiveness, if you say, oh, I forgive you, but I'm not going to forget. Sorry, you didn't forgive anybody because you're not forgetting. Forgetting means being present, right? Once you're out of the present moment, you're remembering what somebody did to you. You didn't forgive. You didn't forgive them at all. You can pretend you did. And by the way, that gets my word belief. Oh my gosh. People use the word belief like it's dog doo-doo. You know what belief means? I wish it were so.
I think I remember you saying that last time.
It's not true. It means I wish it were true. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you can believe and manifest something through your belief system. Yes. I think you can believe that you're going to get more money. I think you can believe that you're going to create a better lifestyle for you. Yes, I think in that regard, I think belief is very useful. But when you apply belief to God and all that, wow, that's how you really become very ignorant. The best word, I think, for God is faith, meaning there's no doubt. I know God is, and I have no question about it. Period. That's it. To me, faith is a much powerful word. Belief, little weak from a religious point of view. That's just my opinion.
No, I mean, it's, I think a lot of people use those words interchangeably when they maybe shouldn't.
No, I believe you're not as tall as you think you are.
I'm not, obviously.
Well, I saw your wife. Holy mackerel. What a beautiful woman. Oh, I said, well, am I in the Amazon? What the hell? What I want to also commend you on, the fact that you're such a pleasant person to be around. I do a lot of talking with individuals. On the radio, I've met a lot of people in my lifetime. But there's something that's genuinely innocent about you. There's an innocence, and I mean that as a good thing because innocence is how I associate the present moment. And it doesn't occur to me, but until recently, that I think you have the opportunity eventually, because you have such a lovely family and your children have taught you what being present is really about, that I think you have the opportunity to become enlightened, where you're eventually going to realize how blessed you are, how fortunate you are, and what a wonderful family you have. And I think you have no choice but to become enlightened, because I think it's already built into you, and it's just going to evolve because you almost have no other choice. And what you just said about, we can't really do anything about what we do because we just do it, in a sense. Look at nature. Mm-hmm. A tree. It starts out and it stays in the same place for A redwood, 1,000 years? It hasn't moved? It just stays there and does its thing, right? It's the color of the leaves, the bark, it just happens, right? I think all of us as people, we're no different than anything in nature. We are born to do what we do. We're born to say and do what we do. We think we're making choices all the time. I don't think so.
Yeah.
We're just doing what we are, because if you're authentic, you have no choice but to be who you are. And by the way, if you're not authentic, that's because you are authentically not authentic.
Yeah. People will know people can figure out if you're not authentic. But when you go back to when you said to be present, that's kind of my kids, more so the older one, because the youngest one wasn't around then. But, I used to work in sports. So I used to work for like the Niners and the A's and the Sharks and everybody. And I used to, and all the concerts in between, right, of all those. And I used to be I would do networking and IT at all these places. And I had to be there for every event. And, it's one thing if you just do football. It's one thing if you just do baseball. But football season, I was missing out on, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's.
Yeah.
And then transition to baseball, and you're missing out on Easter. You're missing out on 4th of July. You're missing out on Father's Day. You're missing out on birthday, and so and then it keeps going. And so I was doing that before I even had kids, right? And it was fine. You get to like meet all these people, go to the Super Bowl and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you're like, my daughter is getting older and I missed a Christmas. I missed another Christmas. I missed Thanksgiving, and like, sure, they came to the game on Father's Day, but it's like, that's not the same. And so like, I couldn't do it anymore. And so I had to leave and I had to retire from sports, and I miss it sometimes. I miss the excitement sometimes, but the trade-off, I would have done it 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000.
I didn't realize we had that in common. I too, I ended up approaching UC Davis years ago under Coach Soker to produce their football games and put them on public access television. Because I found out that legally, if you can get somebody in the community to request something, they have to legally put it on. So I contacted 14 communities in Hawaii, LA, and various places around the state of California. And I got Grant Napier. I hired Grant Napier. I gave him his first job as a sports announcer when he was at Channel 31. And Mike Odino, who was the director at Channel 3 and then became the director at Channel 31, was a good friend of mine. He ended up becoming my director. And so for 4 years, we did all the Aggie football games and put them on public access. And the funny thing that happened was, all of a sudden, because the kids in Hawaii, it never occurred to us, the kids in Hawaii were watching Aggie football. All of a sudden, UC Davis had these guys from Hawaii going to playing football for UC Davis because they were watching the games on public access in Hawaii. And so all of a sudden, we had these big guys we never had before on UC Davis's football team.
Oh, a big Hawaiian guy is at home on a football team.
And then what that led me to also, because I would spend time in Switzerland every year when I only worked like 16 weeks and I would take the rest of the year off. And I had grown up in Europe, and so I would go to Switzerland. And I had some friends there, so I could always stay for like 4 or 5 months at a time because I didn't have to pay rent. I had friends that had a house, and I could stay there for free. It was really inexpensive to live in Switzerland if you don't have to pay rent, because the transportation is virtually free. You pay like $100 in those days for the year, and you could ride anything for free after $100 for the year. And what happened was I met some producer there. One thing led to another. And they love bicycles. They love recycling. And he knew I was from Davis. So he said, look, let's produce this TV show for Swiss television. So I ended up being an associate producer with this gentleman from Switzerland at Zurich Television. They came to Davis. We ended up spending 2 weeks shooting all the things, all the bicycles, because they love bicycles. And because we had a lot of recycling going on in Davis at that time. This was early on, before other communities were doing this. So that show was on a program called Small Change. It was kind of the equivalent of 60 Minutes. and it would air every Sunday night. That show that we did about Davis and recycling and bicycles and solar panels, it became the most watched TV show in Switzerland that year.
Oh, really?
And so I was kind of gold to them. They thought, oh my gosh, you were so, yeah. And so it was a great thing. And then I got to meet Reinhold Messner. Who that is? Reinhold Messner. Swiss TV called me and said, hey, look, we don't have anybody here to do this. Can you go to Austria and shoot this for us? And I said, okay. So he said, but you have to be there like in 26 hours. I go, okay. So I said, take a taxi, have them drive you there because we can't take trains, they're too slow. So they paid for the transportation. I got there just as they were about to leave to go shoot their situation. Now, Reinhold Messner was the first guy to ever walk all over, I call it the seven somethings. He walked across the Antarctic. He skied across the Antarctic. He climbed Mount Everest. He did all the major things that every climber wants to do. He did all of them. I've been so long since I've done this, talked about this. But here I was spending time with one of the most important people in kind of climbing history with his family. And what he was doing, he decided to cross the Arctic with skis on kites. And he wanted someone to videotape him in Austria using kites on skis to cross the Arctic, but he needed to have somebody videotape it so he could see how the wind would affect the sails. And so I spent a whole day with him and his family and their crew videotaping him skiing with kites. And he then, after took that information, went to the Arctic and crossed using kites based on the information that I was able to shoot for him. So I got to meet some really amazing people. As you know, being in the media, you do get to meet some pretty amazing people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that. Damn, that sounds like fun.
It was fun. And I
mean, like the kite skiing.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
That's
yeah, I don't see
I
it
never knew
anywhere. I mean, funny. They should probably sell kites up in Tahoe.
Yeah,
and so people can ski with the kites.
Yeah,
especially for cross country. I think it'd be much better for cross country.
Yeah, I guess because Tahoe's mainly the slopes,
right.
You know,
whereas Arctic is pretty. It has various movements, but they took the flat terrain.
I mean, you could do that. It could do that on like the salt flats.
Yep, absolutely.
With like a skateboard or something.
Wow, now you're
talking.
That
with a skateboard.
That's a great idea.
With like the mud tires.
Yeah, mud tires. Yeah.
Wow, that's a good idea.
Hey, you heard it here first, folks. So let's tell them where you can where they can find you.
michaelmercury.com or mercuryminute.com. It's been such an amazing thing for me to do astrology. I studied at the Berkeley Psychic Institute years ago and learned to read auras. And I'm just having an incredible life. I love being alive. And you know, I've come close to dying many, many times. And it taught me a great deal. And what happened was I kept losing my awareness of the present moment. And I remember going back to the 12th century. I went to the 14th century. I literally found myself in these other centuries while I'm in this body. And they call it bipolarism, mental illness. What I've learned is mental illness is really people are really going to past lives or having problems with the ignorance of the present moment. And they're afraid. And so they revert back to, if there are past lives, and I'm pretty sure there are because I've experienced them personally, mental illness has been totally misunderstood. And they drug these poor people up. And it's just horrible what we're doing to ourselves medically. We really need to re-examine our medical situation. But to answer your question, mercuryminute.com. I'm revamping. I have just revamped recently my website a little bit, so I'm excited. But I don't do many readings because I don't really promote myself. I like to live a simple, quiet life. I teach yoga a couple of times a week now. I've really pulled back. Writing has become more important to me. I'm 77 years old, and my body feels like I was in high school or college, and it's because of yoga. So I recommend anybody who's watching, if you want to die healthy, take yoga because it allows you to leave quickly rather than to linger for months and before you die.
Man. Yeah. That hits home for sure. I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you so much.
And I love the conversations that we have. I always get a little bit out of it. So
I appreciate it.
all right, we'll do this again.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, guys.